Good evening. Welcome to Talk of the Town, our monthly show about politics at the national, state, and local level. Our regular host tonight, Terry Devaney, is in our South Florida Bureau. We wish him well and looking forward to his return next month. My name is Len Lucci. On my right is the Mayor of Bowie, Fred Robinson. On the left, prominent attorney Lynn Skirpon from a prominent law firm. We're going to talk first about some national issues and then work our way down to the depths of local issues. Let's talk about the demolition derby. That's the Republican presidential campaign. We've had 6 different front runners. We now have Rick Santorum, who's waging war on prenatal care. What do you make of all this, Mr. Mayor?
It's interesting. I still think at the end of the day that Romney's going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. He's getting bruised and has to spend a lot of money, but of the group that you've talked about, the ones that have risen and fallen, I think he's the one that, as you know, since we're all outsiders in that group, I think he's the one that offers the most credible challenge and the most moderate challenge that can bring Republicans and independents into the vote mix. Mr. Santorum, is a great speaker, and he's got an interesting history. I'm just not sure he's going to bring a lot of. He may do well in the primary, but I just don't see that transitioning into the general election. So, but you're right; they're beating each other up, and they're spending all their money on TV ads and stuff like that. So, whenever this is settled, assuming it's settled, then they got to start all over again. Whichever one wins to gear up for run against the president.
Lynn, what's your take on this?
I'm actually starting to hear talk about no lock on the convention.
A brokered convention?
Yes, and then what if? As a Democrat, I agree with you that Romney, if I were a Republican, I would think of Romney as the leading candidate to beat the Democratic incumbent president. But I'm not sure Republicans are thinking like that, especially in a primary. They want, I think my take on this is that they're going with the most conservative, true Republican. And I don't think that's Romney right now. And I think it's a mistake on the Republicans' part. And who knows what if they go into a convention without a clear.
Yeah. You know, the Michigan primary is next Tuesday, and it's Romney's home state where he grew up, went to high school. His father was governor there, was the president of American Motors there. And he's losing in the polls in Michigan to Santorum right now because Santorum has this appeal to working class voters that Romney does not have an appeal to. And Gingrich said that if Romney loses his home state, then now is a Gingrich-Santorum race. And it's a silly thing. We all laugh about it because the guy's down back in single digits. But the guy who's financed his super PAC, Sheldon Adelson, said he's given him $10 million already, and he doesn't mind giving him $100 million.
Yeah, I heard that today.
And it's the whole thing this year. The worst development of this year is these super PACs, because ever since the Watergate, they changed the election so there's a limit on how much you can give a candidate, and that applies to everybody, no matter how wealthy you are. Because in the Nixon race in 1972, they found millions of dollars in safes, and they had people giving millions of dollars and actually buying the presidency. It's back, and it's terrible. And it was the 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court, and hopefully that could be reversed someday or a constitutional amendment, but it is the biggest threat to polluting our democracy, I think, that there is right now. It's a horrible thing because you could be down and out. One person writes one big check and you're back.
Well, that's what's clearly happened in the Gingrich. I mean, if it weren't for his Las Vegas supporter, he would be out by now. He did have a great line today. I saw him talking to some people in Oklahoma, and he was saying, Democrats don't understand. You can't put a gun rack in a Chevy Volt. He's still out there looking for his niche. I don't know. I hear the same thing you hear about Michigan as a break or don't break thing for Romney. My head tells me you're right, but my gut tells me that I don't think he's lost it yet, and even if he does, I'm not really sure, that it's the Armageddon that Gingrich would have you believe. But it's me, and he's still 10 or 12 points ahead in Arizona, and then the following week you got all of the
Super Tuesday.
the Super
Right.
Tuesdays, and I don't think anybody other than Romney, from what I can see looking at from the outside, is funded well enough and organized well enough to cover all of those states at the same time. While he's campaigning today in Michigan, Santorum's in Texas at a fundraiser. So, you kind of see where the pressures are falling.
Romney clearly has the financial advantage, but even last month's report showed that he had a 287% burn rate, which meant that he spent 2.5 times more than he raised, and all the money he's been saving for the general election against Obama, he's spending now.
Yeah, there's
That's what's
also a
gonna
number.
hurt the
Yeah, I heard
Republicans.
another number today that now that the president has decided that super PACs aren't such a bad thing after all. And
Well, he never said that.
Well, he said that they were the bane of democracy. They were marking the end of democracy, but now he's going to
Play
embrace
by
it
the
again.
rules that exist.
Yeah. But anyway, the point I was going to make is somebody was saying today that the one committee that they set up raised $59,000 in January, almost all of it from one donor, and they spent $250,000. So you're right. The influence of money and the fact of the money and where you don't know. I heard one day, it may have been George Wills that I heard it from. He said a very simple way to control this, and that is no cash, total reporting, no foreign money. And if you do that, and if these guys report every day what money comes in or every week or whatever it is, and let people see who's giving the money, where the money's coming from, and what the linkages are, for everybody across the board. I'd love to see that at the state legislative level. I mean, they make these reports every 6 or 8 months or something like that, and I just don't see that. I can't put the practice and the word transparency in the same sentence anymore. It's just, you're right. It's a challenge, but I don't know how you get rid of it.
Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, what you can do now is have real-time disclosure instead of just 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, the
city almost
technology
does
is
that,
there,
yeah.
and it's just a matter of whether the will is there or whether the ability to pressure all the candidates to make say and put some teeth in the, right now, if 3 years after the fact, the commission says, well, you did something, so we'll slap you on the wrist. Put some real teeth in it. Send some people to prison, for Pete's sakes, if they violate the law.
Heck, that's what we do in Prince George's County, by now.
Just this week, right? Yeah, it's tough when you have to get adjoining cells.
Is it?
The family that goes to jail together stays together, right?
So let's talk about the Maryland General Assembly. This week, it hits its halfway mark on Thursday, the 45th day. Things are starting to happen. We just had the House sent over to the Senate the marriage equality bill with 1 vote to spare. And then other issues are coming up. We make Maryland the 7th or 8th state. It's early in the session. Is it possible that this could still go down in a filibuster if they can't beat cloture, you think? Or I think it's a done deal now.
I would think it's a done deal, mainly because the Senate passed it last year, and the House didn't. And if it came first from the House and it's through the House, I would. Of course, I've been wrong before. I would think it's a done deal. And now, of course, this year the governor's on board. I mean, the governor's on board big time. I would think it's going to pass.
Yeah, my guess is you're right. I think
They may play with it for a
the
while.
Senate passed it last year, and there's no reason to think that there's been a remarkable shift of votes. So I think it's a thing done. I think the other reality is it'll go to referendum.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's no way that the vote that's that close is not going to end up in referendum on that an issue that's not only substantive but emotional.
And it's going to be, who knows what's going to happen at referendum, because it's a presidential election year. People come out to vote who don't normally vote, and I think it's going to be still a tough
And
road.
you're also going to have referendum issues on gambling and a couple other things. And
the
so,
DREAM Act from last year.
Yeah,
is on the ballot.
Right.
DREAM Act.
Right.
Yeah, it's possible they all go down, and they'll all get caught up in an anti-tax sweep and
A tsunami.
yeah, a tsunami.
And the hopes for the Democrats to pick up a 7th congressional seat in Western Maryland could go down with those ballot
Well, you know,
questions.
if the tax issue or an anti-tax mood or an anti-government move takes hold, I think you may very well be a prophet.
And then the other issue that's percolating now is gambling, or gaming is the way they call it. That's if it's just a game that you don't lose any money at. But gaming with both slots and the proposal have table games. Our Senator Doug Peters is the point person in legislation to have both the county and the state have a say in whether there would be gaming in the southern part of the county, either Rosecroft or National Harbor, including table games, raising the take that the folks would get who operate these places. And then the county executive has a slightly different proposal. Well, maybe not slightly different. He wants it to be at National Harbor with $1 billion investment. And the Peters proposal ties it to hospital funding, and the county executive says, no, that funding's already set. I don't want it tied to the hospital. And so the hearing's tomorrow, and everyone in Annapolis has a different opinion. So what's the prognosis, Dr. Robinson?
7 to 5. Yeah. My guess is that the economic pressures may very well trump the moral issues.
Trump's a good word too to use.
Yeah, call it Trump Center. My guess is there's going to be a lot of pressure to put some kind of a full-blown casino, and it'll end up at National Harbor. And I think if that's the case, then you'll see a duplicate probably in Baltimore, maybe at the convention center or something like that, because you're not going to end up with just one. But this is an area where I agree with the county executive. I've always been one that really has a problem with dedicating income from one thing to a specific. It ought to go into the county's general fund, and the elected officials ought to decide what to do with that. I think tying it to the hospital thing is confusing. I still don't understand why, we've had this conversation before, why it's only Prince George's that has to play this pat on your head and, you do this and we'll give you, your hospital or something. I think we may be the only jurisdiction in the state that has to play these games. All the other county hospitals across the state are well funded, and most all, state organizations. But my guess is, particularly given the way the votes have gone, and the Marriage Act and whatever, and the School Act, the Dream Act, and my guess is that trend will continue in the legislative side. But like I said earlier, I think all of them are going to end up on referendum, and once that happens, all bets are off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this one clearly has to go to referendum. Mm-hmm. It has to be a constitutional
amendment. Well, let me ask one of you
to
two lawyers. How do you draft a bill that says that we have a constitutional amendment that only applies to Prince George's, but everybody in the state gets to vote on it, or Prince George? I think there's some incredible legal issues that are popping up on this.
Actually, one issue did come up. As I understand it, when the bill was originally drafted, maybe the way it still is, it required referendum, and that the referendum pass statewide, but also pass just within Prince George's County, to have this facility or gaming built in Prince George's. And the Attorney General, Doug Gansler, has opined that the bill could not be be
the county can't have a veto
with just the ability of the county to veto it. That would disenfranchise other counties in effect.
Yeah.
So they're working on some language. I'm not sure if they can. But meanwhile, the head of the anti-slots movement in Prince George's County is somewhat familiar to all of us here, and that's former Delegate Jerron Levi, who's organizing ministers against any expansion of gambling in Prince George's County.
Well, it isn't. I mean, I guess I don't have the same moral aversion to the gambling. I mean, my sense is, I think it's foolish, and I think the slot machines are a self-imposed tax, and I know that there's a legitimacy to the complaint that some people will be abused by the process. Whether that's a large number or a small number, I don't know. But I think there's a huge amount of dollars that are out there to be tapped. And when you start looking at other alternatives to raise the same kind of money, I just don't see them out there. There's not going to be, look at the fight that we're anticipating over gas tax. Look at the fight that's going to be about, reducing deductions and increasing taxes and other things. I just don't see the will in the legislature to raise a lot of taxes. I mean, the fight is going to be over gas, but they got to come up with some money somewhere.
I don't think anybody's first choice is gaming. I mean, that's not the county executive's first choice. But that decision was made several years ago, and we have not gaming, but we have slots in Maryland. We have the lottery, we have slots. That's done.
Yeah, you've already made that decision.
But don't you two think there's a finite amount of disposable income?
Sure there is.
That's going to go to these things. So if you open up one, you're just taking it away from another one. It's a zero-sum game.
I do to some extent, but the gaming, I think, is an addition. The slots and lottery
table
and all
games.
That. The table games, I think, is different, and especially if the location turns out to be National Harbor, because there are an awful lot of conventioneers, international travel, people coming to D.C. on business, and I think that is a natural market.
Yeah, the only way it works is that there is a
people.
finite number of dollars. So the only way you can do it is expand the base of people that might be interested in doing it.
Take other people's money.
Yeah, take Virginians' money.
Right.
But I don't really think the table gamers, and maybe I'm wrong, but my gut is they're not also slots players for the most part.
Well, from what I
Usually
gather,
wealthier folks,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, but
I don't know. But
I don't
from
know.
what I gather in the gaming, and particularly when you looked at Vegas and Atlantic City, the money maker is the slots. For all of them.
Is it really? I don't
They
know.
have all the other games there, but the ones that consistently makes money for the house is the slot machines.
because they're
just so
The
many.
odds are
computers,
horrible.
and they can set the computers however they want.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all they are, is a bunch of computer terminals. I mean, it used to be fun when you could pull down the one arm, and the lights would go off and the coins
And the
come out.
coins would come.
The coins don't come out anymore because they have it's on your card, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have there's a button instead of the one arm you pull down. So
And then
I
you
mean,
push it and you get a slot of paper, and it
Yeah.
says, "Go redeem this somewhere." It's not
a year or so ago in Nevada, they actually had a bill in the state legislature to allow slot machines at hospitals. You would eliminate the middleman. You could say, "I want an EKG, baby," and put that in the thing. But
Well,
Didn't pass.
I told people this story, I believe it. When my wife and I were in Vegas recently, and I'm standing there watching a guy that's probably late 70s, 80s, with an oxygen tank, a cigarette in his fingers, and he is stuffing coins into the slot machine as fast as it'll accommodate him. And I looked over at my wife and I said, "I sure hope this guy's here on his bucket list," because I just couldn't believe it. I went to one of those places up in Delaware before they opened up the ones here in Maryland, and when you walk in there, if you look at the median age of the people that are playing there, it makes you wonder whether we have serious elderly issues in the state, because most of the people that are in there during the day, are older residents. But like I say, I consider it, at the end of the day, a self-imposed tax.
Right. Speaking of taxes, we have proposed this year a gas tax, an Amazon tax on
Internet sales.
On internet sales. We have the iTunes tax for digital goods, the income tax increase, tax on other tobacco products like chewing tobacco and those little flavored cigars. What do you make of all this? Are they all going to be left on the editing room floor at the end of the session? Or?
I think the big issue is going to be the gasoline tax. I know you and others have suggested that when there's a rise in the cost, maybe it's the least difficult time to camouflage a cost. But I think when Joe Sixpack, many of whom is underemployed or unemployed, are paying $100 to gas up their car, and we tell them that we're going to add another $2 or $5 or whatever of that for tax, I think that's going to be a hard sell. And the problem with over the last several years, I know this sounds foolish, but I mean, you make the argument that the legislative leadership over the last couple of years, it's like the kid that killed his parents and then was pleading for mercy because he was an orphan. what they did is they gutted the highway trust fund and spent it on everything else. And now they come back and say, oh my goodness, there's no money in the highway trust funds. We have to raise taxes. And yet you still have the president of the Senate saying that, in his opinion, there is no constitutional requirement that money raised for that purpose has to be spent for that purpose. And it's his position that money that gets distributed out to the counties and the cities are a revocable grant and not a formula-driven state shared. So when you have those two conditions there and no condition to prevent future rating of the thing, I don't know where you're going to get the support for it.
But on the other hand, we are required to have a balanced budget. Where is the money going to come from? There are only so many cuts. We've been through the cuts.
Maybe we can cut something somewhere. Maybe cut a department or something.
I mean, why have a treasurer's office and a controller's office? Isn't that too?
Well, you heard my suggestion last time we talked. I had a great idea for tax rate, and that is tax campaign contributions at the highest marginal level. So if you raise $10 million to run for governor, $3 million ought to go into the state coffer. You know, charge them 30%, and get your own bumper stickers out. Says, I'm a politician, tax me.
I don't think it'll pass.
I think there's a real aversion to taking all these separate tax votes in Annapolis, but I do think if they're able to take one vote on maybe a one income tax proposal that would take care of everything, they all might jump in the pool together and do it. But if they have to vote on each of these taxes, it'll be, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, for instance, when in the Glendenning first term, I guess it was, they reduced state income tax rates by 10%. And if you reverse that back to where we were then in the 90s, you would take care of everything in one fell swoop.
And that's across the board. That's not just for the high earners.
Right. Now, you could soften that by changing the brackets more, making it more progressive. But
I don't know. There may be something where they'll all hold hands and jump in the pool, but, you know, I'm hearing the same kind of things that you're hearing and you're hearing, and that is a lot of senators and delegates are very reluctant to be out front of any issue that's related to a tax increase. And like you say, there may well be a logical basis for it or a need for it, but particularly like we were talking earlier, it depends on where these votes go and where the public sentiment is. And like I say, I mean, I may be completely off base, but I just don't see it unless you're right. If they can focus on one issue, one tax that has some significant impact, whether it be sales tax or whatever, and say we're going to do this for 2 years or have a sunset on it or do something, it may make it less unattractive enough that a majority up there will hold hands and do it. But I'm not sure I see it.
What about the proposal to shift back some of the costs, the pension costs, to the counties? That'll balance the state budget, but then what do the counties do?
right, you know, several $100 million over the next several years. There's been a lot of pushback on that. I'm not sure that that'll happen.
Well, you know, there's a certain logic, and this is one area where I tend to agree with the legislative leadership anyway, that, you know, if the counties are going to set the rates for compensation, and the state doesn't have any control of that, but the state is responsible for the, you know, the potential pension costs, you know, there is an element of, hate to use the word fairness, but an airness of debate there. But I don't see the state just routinely shipping all the costs off. There may be some gradual thing, but I still think the only way out of this is to stop the hemorrhage. You know, say every teacher hired after this date on will be treated differently in terms of retirement, and whether that's 401 or something like that, and stop the hemorrhage and have a two-tiered system for as long as it takes until that last teacher takes their last check. I mean, that could be 2 generations for all I know, but at least you would see the light at the end of the tunnel. And you could do that for, because I still think sooner or later, a government's going to get out of the pension business. I mean, if you look at all the horror stories across the country where cities and towns are going out of business, they're all, you know, going belly up, they're going bankrupt, because they can't meet these obligations. So sooner or later, they're going to do like Bowie does, and that is we have a defined contribution retirement plan as opposed to a defined benefit. You know, we've been doing that for 10 years. And that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, we're as solvent as we are. But if you look at other governments, they're just the opposite.
And then this Thursday is the 45th day of the session, as we were saying, and that means if nothing else happens about the General Assembly, the redistricting plan takes effect.
And that is the worst
You don't
thing.
have any thoughts on this, Mr. Mayor, do you?
No, I think it's outrageous. I think that was handled poorly. I think the attitude that's coming from the governor's office and from the legislative leadership on this is just, you know, just the hell with you guys. I'm going to do it anyway. You know, their argument being we're doing this because we have to do this because we want more majority districts. And when you tell them that with or without this distinction, 23 is a minority district. So it's a solution in search of a problem. It's a terrible, terrible process. I'm hoping that at the last minute somebody sees the wisdom of getting rid of that arbitrary distinction, and then give us 2 years to work out the math of putting 4 delegates into 3 slots. But my guess is, absent some kind of an adult look at this and a revisiting of this, there's going to be a lot of repercussions for this, and they're not going to go away anytime soon.
Lynn, do you think this process needs to be reformed? How would you do it?
I think it needs to be reformed. I don't know how you do it. Seriously, it's entrenched. It's protect the incumbents.
That's the first priority, you know.
Right.
It's the Incumbent Protection Act.
I guess you get it out of the legislative process and you have an independent board or commission make the recommendations.
Yeah, I think the day you achieve that will be the same day I'll go to New
Right,
York and see
right.
the Niagara Falls going backwards. You know, they're not going to give up that authority. You know, it's the same reason why I can't get the county and the state to delegate back to the cities things like allowing us to approve beer and wine sales in grocery stores or making land use decisions. It's all about, I'm the state, I'm the omnipotent power, and you have to come to me every time you want to change the smallest bit of this because I'm going to control everything. And then at the county level, I'm going to control all the land use in this county because I enjoy the relationship with the development community. And, notwithstanding the fact that as a result of that attitude, a number of our people are in prison. And maybe more are going to join them. But anyway.
Yeah, we don't know. The latest investigations was around the hospital. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a lively discussion, as always, at all levels of government. We hope you've enjoyed it. And come back and see us next week. We'll have the return of Mr. Bernard Terrence Devaney. Thank you.
Yeah, bringing back from the sunshine.